All right, class. In this lecture, we are going to look at how the media influences politics and governments. All right. So, first of all, we have to look at why do we have the media? Why did it come about? What is its purpose? And a lot of ways, media helps keep us informed. So, it keeps us informed on what's going on with our government and other social institutions, lets us know what's going on in the grander world. And so it is helping to form opinions and political socialization. So, whether we're talking about a public opinion or political socialization, we're talking about ideas, beliefs, values, thoughts that we have about the governmental process and about, the country we live in and how we want our society and culture to go, right? So the opinion there is more that general consensus of the population. And of course, consensus is just that too. It's this general agreement. And, consensuses come in the forms of things like polling, things like statistics. And of course, we always have to be careful with those. And the key there when it comes to statistics and polling, guys, is it's really just doing research and making sure that data you're looking at does have well-rounded research behind it. You'll find a lot of companies will push agendas through doing things like consensuses, doing things like research studies. And, that's where we tend to get false and misleading information. And we kind of talked about that last week, talking about misleading statistics, right, guys? And so when we have divided public opinion, that's where we see a lot of polarization and a lot of conflict in society, because that's when, once again, as humans, we go to the extreme. So we tend to divide ourselves along extremes, right? It's either, you know, abortion, not abortion. It's either religion, not religion. It's this or that. Once again, that very black and white way of trying to confine us in the world when we know that life is so much more a spectrum than that. And so, I would venture to argue that the media has, in many ways, always been a dividing, as much as it is used for entertainment. Once again, it's polarized, and it's like entertainment and swaying public opinion are the two main reasons we have media in all its different forms. And, it's kind of when it comes to that, opinion part, it really has always been used more for propaganda and to divide than it has been to like help people come together. But like I said, that's just one argument on it. And everybody has opinions and ideas about things, and this is something we keep talking about in our lectures too, is where do we draw the line between freedom of speech and speech that's not productive and positive. It's like, just because we have the freedom in our country to say whatever we want does not always mean that everything we think in our head should be expressed verbally. And that is true at these larger levels when we look at media, politics, government, any kind of institution, and it's true down into our own lives and families and workplaces. I said, just because we're allowed to say it doesn't mean it should be said. And, that's one of the bad things about media, especially the way that it's been turned into social media, is that now everybody gets to say whatever stupid thing they have in their head. And there is something to being mindful and being thoughtful before you open your mouth to speak. And, social media doesn't give us that reflection time, right? But then, social media is just a tool, guys. Like, you would think I love social media because the animals in the farm have a very strong social media presence. But that's all it is, guys. It's just a tool. It's just a way for us to share about what we're doing with the animals, and that's really it. I don't really use it much beyond that. I just see it as this tool, and I certainly don't live my private and personal life out on social media. But hey, some people do like to do that, like my little sisters, and I guess it works for them, right? And so when we get to these ideas of public opinions and getting consensuses, once again, this is when we really they start hitting us with these statistics and these drafts, not drafts, graphs. And, we have to be kind of careful at what we're looking at. Now, I don't want to make any negative association here. I don't think, sexual orientation, sexual identity, religion, skin color. I mean, those are gender, like those are things that should not matter when it comes to jobs. If you can do the job and you're capable of it, you have the education and the skills to do it, then all that other stuff doesn't have a lot to do with your work unless you're just maybe a horrible personality, and then that's going to bleed through into everything you do, right? But my point is that sometimes these consensuses are misleading because they don't give us an accurate view. Like, let's look at this graph here, okay? And like I said, no context of anything that has to do with those questions over there. We're just thinking purely about this graph and what it is, just looking at this graph. If someone just gave you this graph and said this is the consensus, number one, you're automatically thinking these numbers, these percentages add up to 100. So they always want us to think that just because that adds up to 100, that means that it represents 100% of the population, right? And then we have to realize that this graph right here could be used for a study to say that, in a study of 20 people, um 7 out of 10, I'm just making stuff up, guys, but bear with me, 7 out of 10 of them like this new kind of ice cream flavor, right? And so that's kind of how advertising and marketing works. They do get these small groups of people, and they test these new food and flavor products out on them, and then based on those 20-25 people, then they come up with these numbers that are, say, well, the majority. And I think for something like ice cream flavor, that's not really something that's going to make or break the bank, right? It's like you're not going to wake up tomorrow and your whole world be destroyed because there's an ice cream flavor, or they took your ice cream flavor away. You know what I mean? Where these kind of things get dangerous is when you start, psychology is a good example, because all these tests that come out for all these new drugs, there's a reason that the list of side effects are longer than the list of things those drugs cure, because the majority of those experiments have been done with limited funding, limited groups of people, and up until probably about the early 80s, any kind of research in psychology was only done on college age white males. And so, all this information about these drugs and what they're supposed to treat as far as, psychiatric and mental disorders go, you know, limited to the small group of volunteer college students. And so, yeah, so it's not until they send those things out into the wider world, and more people start taking that medication, like I said, that's when we start seeing all these negative side effects. So that's kind of scary, especially when you go from like the 80s to about the early 2000s. There, they don't really push as much, pharmaceutical companies, not since COVID anyway, I would argue. But they used to really push the idea of drugs. We needed drugs for everything, and it's okay. They're good drugs because they're prescription drugs. But, I remember there being commercials of, you know, just, I mean, telling you that you're a horrible person and you have a terrible personality and people will like you if you take this prescription drug. And then, children and your life, they see that kind of stuff and they think, oh, well, I need that, that'll help me out. So, yeah. So, the best type of statistics, the best type of data that's really going to give you a good overall view of the topic is going to be well rounded. And, there is going to be a lot of research. And then, sometimes there are going to be issues that do not have a lot of research. And that's another way that we participate in life and we help make, society better for ourselves and everybody else is that, there are those issues that we can be the ones to, set the precedents there and do the legwork, do the experiments, do the research to kind of, get that new angle to something. That's a big part. As humans, we are rational, problem solving creatures, but we're also really creative creatures because you can't solve problems if you don't come up with some kind of idea. It's the creative part of it. Comes to looking at these different data and these census questions and these census pools, there are we have to remember that sometimes they're generational too. And so we have to be careful with that because they'll bring in old data on us in the news and stuff and kind of try to trick us into thinking that something's always been that way and because the graph says so. And we just, once again, you gotta keep yourself open and then keep yourself informed and make sure that you're looking at all the different angles to something because that's just what being an informed, caring, responsible citizen means, I think, no matter where you live, right? All right. And so, oh wait, I'm sorry, did we go through, hold on, I'm on the wrong slide here. There we go. So, all right. So, once again, political socialization. Those are those values, those beliefs, those ideas that we form about I don't want to just say politics because it's about society and social institutions and just how the country that we live in goes about taking care of its citizens. Remember, think back to that first lecture. We talk about the basic purpose of governments is to take care of its members, right? So, how do we form political socializations? Where do those values and those ideas and beliefs come from? Of course, just like anything, we all start out with our family unit. Remember, that's just basics, social culture, evolution. And I mean, it's kind of basic human development slash evolution in that, we all start out with our family unit. They are, it's our family members that are giving us our first socialization of any kind. These are the first other human beings. These are the first times we encounter joy, conflict, sorrow. And, it's the foundation for how we go out and interact with and engage and view others, right? And then, of course, once again, education. Our education does play a role and our values and beliefs. And, it's not just on the political sphere there, it's on pretty much any part of being human, from our temperaments to our emotional intelligence to our personalities to, like I said, things like political, religious beliefs and just ethics and morals, right? And then, once we start developing more and we start to age, then of course we start having more experience with greater society. And so that's when our peer groups start to have influences over us. And peer groups really influence us during adolescence and early adulthood. This is a time when our brains are not fully developed yet, and we're still learning how to process all our emotions, and it's also a time of great creativity. I mean, when we look throughout history and we look at groups that have enacted true social change, college age kids are the most are pretty innovative. And then even, once again, adolescence, once it seems like you hit puberty and on, that there are these very exciting times in life. And back in the 40s and 50s, there along that time frame, when we actually define childhood into these different, because before that we just thought that kids were many adults. It didn't matter if they were 1 years old or 13 or 63. It's like, a human was a human. And so kids were supposed to be like, you know, in many ways, they were treated like adults. And then, we define these stages of childhood and so on and so forth. My point there is that, it's during adolescence, early adulthood that we're being most influenced by outside environmental sources. At the same time, too, this is we're still not developed, so we're still very much forming our identities and our personalities. So that's why, you got to be careful with those peer group influences. They can be detrimental to some people if you don't have those healthy positive regard groups, right? And I think, once again, that's for any stage of life you're at. You always want to try to surround yourself with people that are supportive of you and your endeavors. And people are honest too, because if you're stepping out of line, you want people who are going to help you in that way too, right? That's another one of those purposes of being human. We help build each other up and support each other. And then, of course, we know that things like leaders, our political leaders, religious leaders, social leaders, things like news media outlets, even in the artists, celebrities. All of these are different sources of information, different ideas, beliefs, values, and opinions that have some shape and influence over us, because, as humans, we don't live in isolation, and we do tend to form peer groups, or just groups in general, that closely align with what we think and believe, right? But we have to be careful of confirmation bias and bias in any form, because we don't. I'll use my hate speech groups as an example. You don't want to be the hate speech that's sitting in somebody's basement among themselves, just spewing off, bouncing negativity off of each other, which better there than out in greater society, right? But my point is that once again, to be informed, responsible, I think mature citizen of your society, your culture, the world, the human, whole human species. We really, once again, you don't want to get yourself in a mindset that is not a positive and productive for anybody. If you guys get what I'm saying, it's that confirmation bias. Don't. Oh, I'm gonna say, don't live in a glass house and throw rocks. That's probably one part of it. But once again, don't just surround yourself people who are going to have, these same negative ideas. That's just not part. I don't think that it's just not healthy. Okay, we'll end it right there. All right. All right. And then, once again, we have to think about different ideas and how they relate. Roscoe, what is that? All right then. And when it comes to not even so much just looking at divided political opinion, but just opinion in general. Once again, we are so much more multicultural today in our country than we have ever been through been in our history. So because of that, we know from history that groups have been marginalized and they have fought to get just the basic of rights, like the right to vote, civil rights movement, women's suffrage movement. And then we have to remember too that, life is about growing and changing and evolving. And so as we become more multicultural, more dimensional, just as human beings in our experiences in this world, on this planet, we're going to have to adjust. So, civil things like our civil rights are going to change, laws are going to change, and we have to be, once again, mindful of, everybody to the best of our opinion. And, and so when we think about these new laws that are being created, we want to, think about what is the opinion? What's the information we have there? What are those sources of socialization that are going to influence our decisions in supporting those laws or not? And of course, all people should be protected. It doesn't matter who you are or what you believe or what you feel or think. We're all human beings, and equality is something we should be striving for everybody. And we've seen, groups have already fought in the past to get that, so that we can continue to help make I know it sounds so Pollyanna, doesn't it? And Susie Sunshine to be like, so we can make the world a better place for everybody, unicorns and rainbows all around. And of course, we're still going to have that conflict. But conflict is not all a bad thing. And, if we're not here in life to experience as much of being human and everything that this life has to offer, then like life's pretty boring any other, if you go against that. So at the end of the day, everybody deserves the opportunity and just the solvent right of being alive and breathing in this world, be able to go out and explore and experience life. Of course, there's always a caveat, because you just can't do that and hurt other people, right? And so that's something we have to be considerate of too when we think about these consensus. I don't know how you say that, plural. When you think about those in public opinion, political socialization, divided socialization is right now I forgot what I was going to say, guys. I'm so sorry. I was going to say something, just reiterate something about those ideas of equality there. But when it comes to the media, the media is a driving force behind a lot of how we get to experience the world, even though we have this playing field, and you leave your house or you don't leave your house, we somehow, like me teaching online, I communicate through the digital experience with other people more so than I do in real life on some days, some weeks, some months, depending on how many classes I have and how busy I have. And then I have other experiences where I'm out in society doing things. Sometimes media is a way that a lot of us, media technology, a way that we kind of interact with each other. And it's definitely, once again, since its inception, it's been about sharing information. It's been about entertaining us, and that starts to get a little gray and hazy there when we're trying to take serious issues like politics and put that in an entertainment platform. That's where, once again, you got to keep yourself informed and do your own research there, because you have to be careful of what those greater agendas are. And I think Bernie Cohen's classic statement here about the media is pretty prolific, right? Is be like, yeah, media don't tell you what to think, but they certainly keep us distracted with a lot of stuff, right? And then, of course, our and then, of course, when it comes to the media, we already did all that. Let me make sure I haven't missed any of notes. Oh, and then when it comes to the media, of course, politically, there are channels of mass communication. They determine the public policies and set those precedents with the questions, because you see it on the news, the questions, the issues, and then you take it out into your local community and you talk to other people about it, right? And then, the media is supposed to have a general equanimity about it, because when it comes to political issues, it's not supposed to sway you on either side. And that's because of the fairness doctrine. So, just like you guys know, there's this law. It's kind of a law, but it's kind of this unwritten law too. It's called the Kellogg Brand Act. And after World War I, pretty much all the powerful countries signed it. So I mean, it's kind of like a doctrine. They signed this document saying that they would never, ever, ever go to world war against each other again. And funny how in just two generations, 20, 40 years there, that seemed to get ignored. And I feel the same way about the fairness doctrine. It's like, okay, so we kind of made this policy to say, political issues have to be balanced. You can't have news source is on one point of view. And it's like, well, funny, we seem to forget about one-sided. So, that's why, once again, I try to kind of, I watch and listen to all of it, because and snake oil salesmen, guys, cult leaders, anybody that stands up and claims to have the one real true, way to go, they've got it. Those are probably the ones you really just need to run as far away from as you can. People who are presenting alternate viewpoints are better. And I would say, yes, we can argue that on every news media outlet there's always some kind of oppositional view. But once again, I feel like a lot of the times they set bad precedents, because they're right there just they just argue with each other, and they're rude and will interrupt the other person. And then we see that played out in our individual lives with our family and our friends and our coworkers. And it's like, wait a minute, why are we throwing all this negativity around? There's got to be a way for everybody just to take a deep breath and really talk about these issues. I guess I feel that way because I am a teacher, and I feel like you come into a class, whether you're a student or you're the teacher, you number one, have to automatically expect that you're going to be working with a diverse group of individuals, and not everybody is going to have the same ideas and the same opinions. And I feel like the teachers I had who were fair and equitable, and they gave everybody the opportunity to discuss and dialogue and work through conflict when we had differences. Those were a lot better teachers than the ones that would just come in and try to indoctrinate you into this one way of thinking, be it was something I was for or against. It's like, just never try to, indoctrination of any kind and making you believe just one thing is it's so limiting. I guess that's my point there. It seems just so limiting. Life is multifarious. Why limit yourself? And then it can, of course, once again, when it comes to public opinions and how we form our beliefs and our values, media has this great way of keeping these defining moments, these events that happen. They keep it up in our face, right? And always remind us of these types of things. And it's just another way we're not allowing any growth into this idea of political socialization and how we form our public opinions, instead of inundating us with the Watergate, Reagan, FDR, JFK. It just, once again, it's staying locked in one type of narrative, and keeping people limited and uninformed. And when I think if we can use that as springboards to help us come up with those new ideas and find those new ways to be, it would just have to it would definitely be different, right? And then, of course, once again, when we're looking at how our beliefs are formed and in any type of arena there, we've already talked about this. And when it comes to our American government and how our system has gone. These are the top one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, the top 8 ways that have really influenced our country and it influences the way our country is going. And so yeah, that's all we're going to say about that, right? And so we know that so all right, let me go back and explain this a little bit. So we already know from like civil rights movement, and even before that, just started out with abolitionists, and then even just trying to get Black community the right to vote. And then, of course, women's suffrage were kind of the second big marginalized group that were able to get a stronghold and get a fair representation in the government. We have seen since our the history of not just this country but the land on which this country is formed. We have those indigenous people, we have the Native Americans, we have the Hispanic, Latinos, and we know they make up a good part of this country too. And once again, that's because of history, that's because of the people that lived here, that's because of the colonizer, and especially the Spanish conquistadors. They played a big role in the formation of America, before it was even thought about as being America, just, the conquistadors there in general, colonization, right? And so, historically, we know that all of these influences have these are all in ways marginalized groups, and then in ways they're influences that well, I think that's the whole point of the slide, right? These are the influences that has gone about shaping how our country has came to be at the point it is. And once again, we know there are things there that need to kind of grow and evolve, right? And so then when it comes to looking at these demographic influence and thinking about, those ideas of equality, making sure everybody's voices are heard and how the media plays an influence in that, we have to think about those negative things that come up too. And, Donald Trump, when he ran for president and even during his presidency, people yeah, he said some outrageous things about different groups that have been marginalized. And, once again, no for or against opinions there. My point with this is that that's really that, at the same time that's grown citizen in the government and people think the country's falling apart. But at the same time, it's also got a lot of people's attention about what's going on with our government and media outlets, right? So once again, we have to put ourselves in other people's shoes. When we see these outrageous things said on social media or said on the news, TV, or written in the newspapers, if anybody still reads newspapers anymore, then, we have to think about the impact of that. Oh, that's right there on our slide. What is the impact? What overall as political parties, what are they trying to say? I mean, remember, go back to our lecture on political parties we did last week or the week before. I can't really remember, guys. But, getting members, that's how you keep the prestige. That's how you get the influence. That's how you really get policies pushed through and, enacted, right? And so when you have, negative things that are being said about your group or your group is saying about other groups, there are consequences and responsibility and accountability there. Once again goes back to ethics and morals. As humans, none of us are perfect, but at the same time, you know, where do we draw that line between, separating ourselves from other people who are just here trying to have, live life and feed their families and have jobs and, it's all about the good life, right? Everybody is trying to live the good life. And, maybe not people with those really disturbing, like psychiatric disorders, but then again, maybe they are too. That's why they're having these, like, psychiatric disorders, right? And so, once again, just to reiterate, when it comes back to looking at, these ways that we go about measuring public opinion and thinking about news media, it does seem like well, once again, I'd argue it's always been something that has tried to sway us into thinking one way or another. And, so it's like you got to take it all with a grain of salt, because when it comes to the accuracy of results, I do think that's where maybe as just members of society, and you can disagree with me if you want to on this, guys, or agree, but maybe it's our responsibility just as members of the wider group to try to to do that research and make sure that we are surrounding ourselves with as accurate results as we can get. I mean, we don't want to, get in the mindset of 2 + 2 = 5, right? And how easy it could probably be to sway people today that that's the new idea, Mandela effect aside, right? And so, a lot of what we've already we kind of hit on this a little bit about that unscientific and fraudulent polls when I was talking about the idea of confirmation biases, the idea about, limited um, funding and research behind some experiments and test results that go out. And then, there are companies that will they'll just flat out buy off the scientists to write an article that supports whatever agenda it is that they want to push. And, it's kind of sad, but that's just kind of goes back to being an informed and responsible human being is being able to weed through all of that to find the gemstones there. And then sometimes just the poll questions in general are misleading because they're presented in a way that you don't really have to think. It's like, they do this very black and white. Once again, are you for abortion or are you against abortion? You have to decide. There's no, well, was there a third option? Is there a 10th option? It's either this or that. pick right now. There can't be any middle ground. You're either this or that. And so that already automatically starts biasing people because once again it's locking us into one way of thinking, and life is so much bigger and so much more beautiful and diverse than that. And so when it comes to polls about who's going to win an election, this is where they get to be a little misleading to us as the public because they just give us probabilities. And we have seen, especially in recent times, how we've had polls of who's going to run the election. And then we have, these gross differences between the popular vote and what the Electoral College has done. And, then just throughout history, we've seen to where we've had couple wins off the public vote, but for the most part, it's always that electoral college. And, remember, they're the representatives of the people. So, in a way, those public opinions do help those cats. It helps, the members of the electoral college kind of see where the public is going. And, that's when we get run into conflict is when the electoral college pick somebody else, then people feel betrayed and they feel like, they're not being represented or listened to, right? And then, as we've already talked about, what are some of these rules of, or what is the we've are. Let me start over, guys. Take two. And as we have already talked about, we've looked at the different rules that media has played. What's its purpose? It's entertainment foremost. That's when real media really started getting a foothold was about we'll just go with the 20s because that's there we're in the 19th century, we're in the Great War, the First World War. Um radios radio hosts, they played a big role and helping carry information back and forth. And then of course during World War II against the Nazis, we have radio. And even at that time we start to get because we have movies now, and so we start to see actors and actresses getting kind of some political clout, I guess you can say. And we start seeing that whole subsection of media where we have these kind of like celebrity endorsements on political issues. And so you know the entertainment value came in because as human beings in Great Depression, war, all this stuff was going on at this time there at the beginning of the 19th century. And it was what we keep talking about. It was a motivation, it was an incentive, more so than just reporting the news and keeping people abreast of what was going on in other parts of the world. It was about distracting you from the horrors of what was going on in the world too, right? And then when it comes to the media, as we discuss, how does that socialization process, our family, our peer groups, the beliefs and the values that those groups give us, even our workplaces, any social institution, our belief system. These are all ways that we form our opinions of everything in life, not just those social and political beliefs, but media is about helping reinforce all of that in some way or another. And then, of course, it's about providing forums for people because, good or bad, in order to get your message out to the world, you have to have some kind of platform. So, it's just like what I said about social media. It's media in general is just a tool. And, it's up to us to be those informed, responsible, and dare I say, ethical consumers of media so that we don't get locked into a this or that way of thinking. We don't get locked into, confirmation biases that aren't helping us to be innovative and helping us to be positive and productive social agents of change. And then just like anything else, money. Of course, the media is about money because we live in a world to where, we have these economic exchange systems. And, for anything to be viable and to keep growing, you you've got to have a source of income coming in, right? And then, like I said, when it comes to the media, we have challenges too, especially as technology expands and we get these new types of devices we're bringing into our home, internet censorship, once again, freedom of speech, hate speech, these are all issues that in us time period because they didn't have all this stuff 40, 60 years ago, 100 years ago. So once again, we see that evolving, changing nature of society and governments and political parties, and see that, we're getting these new tools that are helping us to realign and some way or another. Because once again, guys, I don't have all the answers, but there's definitely some type of realignment that is going on in this world. And then once again, we have to be discerning and in the information, and the media taking serious issues and turning them into circus sideshows in many ways. We've kind of seen that in some recent elections, and once again, oh man, the biggest role of media is not just entertainment; it's about emotional appeal, and emotional intelligence is about realizing we all have these different emotions, and some of them are not as productive as others, right? And as humans, I think part of being alive is sifting through those emotions and having those emotional evolution, so you become more of that self-actualized person who's an informed, responsible citizen who can take all this information in and weed out all the craziness and find those positive and productive ways to move forward. People like who I think are positive agents of social change throughout history. Oh, Jane Goodall, the Leakeys, who have a big role to play with Goodall there. They're the ones who kind of started her career. The Dalai Lama, I mean, the people who get to be the Pope, um, people like Nelson Mandela, Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., um, John Lewis, these are all types of people. Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry Thoreau. I mean, all Louisa May Alcott, Mary Shelley. In one way or another, those are all people who have inspired me in my life because they either did something great and innovative. Marie Curie, did something great and innovative for their time, and there's still people that we look to today. And so I often ask my students in any class I'm teaching, it's like, who are the next MLKs and Coretta Kings and next John Lewis's? And it's like, it's us, guys. It's all of you. Every one of us have the opportunity every day to stand up and be a positive influence in not just our life but others' lives, or we can just make everybody miserable. Because the balance there to be like, oh, Professor Moore, you just did a this or that on us. Yeah, see, because I'm only human and a part of this country too. So I constantly have to work on, my biases and stuff. But I think the balance there is, once again, take it all with a grain of salt and trying to just keep yourself open and mindful and, be aware of these biases, because when it comes then to confirmation biases, getting ourselves locked in just one way of thinking, this is when we see issues like censorship and once again, freedom of speech and hate speech and things like that coming up. And like I will continue to say, Just because you think it in your head doesn't mean it should come out your mouth. And I am convinced that 95% of the stuff, me included, that comes into our heads should never be shared with others because a lot of it's really just craziness. And environmental influences. We're so inundated with stimuli nowadays that it's hard to find that quiet space, like to disseminate it and digest all of it. And so I go back and forth on regulating speech because, once again, I just don't think that hate speech, no matter what, whether it's on a public arena or even, down once again, I got to take it back to psychology and like in your life, if you're in a crappy relationship, if you sit around with somebody and all day long, you're just, I hate you, you're stupid, those abusive type relationships, you're not going to get anywhere. It's not good for anybody. But, when it comes to hate speech is never good. But at the same time, if we can't allow different ideas to be expressed, I just don't think we're ever going to learn and grow. And, Rush Limbaugh is a very controversial figure. And, I don't know, old Rush there. He had a lot of crazy things to say, but sometimes if you could get through all of that, there were little gems, little glimmers, gems of good things in there. And it just goes back to what I'm saying, to be responsible, ethical, informed members of this country and just members of the human species. I think we need to listen to all sides, and we can't stop people from having their voices heard, because history has already shown us what happens when we just cater to one side, and all these groups have fought to have their voice heard as they do today. And so it's just not good to limit anybody. And then there's a big argument about public broadcasting, and the government like subsidizing that. And so here's another thing I'm kind of like not really sure on. When you get into public subsidy, or not, I mean, federal subsidies of public broadcasting, it makes me think of like the Soviet, the Soviet Union during the Cold War era. It makes me think of the Hitler and the Nazi indoctrination. And that really, Hitler didn't start all of that. Fascism started with Mussolini and Italy, and it started with dude's name I forget in Spain. They had fascism way before Hitler came along. That's kind of where Hitler got his ideas from. But that's more a history lecture. My point is that when you get into the federal government subsidizing public broadcasting, you get that indoctrination in only one way. Whereas, public broadcasting, NPR, public television, like those are funded. They're like nonprofit organizations to where, they exist because people support them and think that they're important and we should have them. And growing up a kid in the 80s, public television was a big deal. That's where we got a lot of our education, the electric company, Sesame Street, and all of these other, programs that were really, because that was the thing in the 80s, and child psychology especially is like, okay, we have this new tool now that we can use to help make smarter citizens, and so in a way we were kind of indoctrinated, but I wouldn't say it was a bad indoctrination, because it was an indoctrination of learning and learning to be yourself, and to be an individual and be creative, and everybody mattered. That's still what Sesame Street does. I think it's a crime they're not on public television anymore, but whatever. And so once again, if the government takes over too much of anything, there's going to be confirmation bias. And, as long as public broadcasting, has support from the public, once again, it's so hard, you know, don't want to limit anybody's access to saying stuff, because that's just never good. History has already showed us how that's a bad thing. But then, at the same time, we've got to be careful of, what type of information is being fed to us. So, just no clear solution on moving forward. But I think the key things to pick up is that, throughout this lecture, is that media does have an influence over politics, and it's best to take a multi approach to that, and keep yourself as informed and educated as you can be. And I shouldn't say this because I am a teacher, and if not for all of you guys taking classes, I wouldn't be able to pay my bills or share the things that I love to talk about. But it's great we have these educational platforms. But at the same time too, educate yourself. We actually, you and I were lucky to have these educational platforms because we have access to a lot more sources of information, because we get libraries and we get these peer-reviewed articles and journals that we get that we oh excuse me well I am at a PhD, being able to have as much access to people's research as possible is a good thing, and so I just encourage everybody to always try to find some ways, to be an informed um citizen, and to be a positive and productive social agent of change. So that wraps up our second part of our lecture, guys. Great job in class. Reach out for anything. I will. I am getting probably by the time you watch this, I will have had our lecture, not lecture, but just a little video I'll make up on some tips and stuff for the assignment due this week. So make sure you're always checking the announcements so you see the information I'm sharing with you guys, so that excuse me, you are most successful in class. Get in the discussions. Make sure you got your APA, guys, and keep up the great work. I appreciate all of you. Don't hesitate to reach out for anything. Thanks, guys. Bye.